Well, good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and let's get started with today's Tolkien Tuesday. Now, over the last several weeks, I've been walking through the letters. By the way, it's old news now, but did you know that a new expanded volume of the letters is going to be released later this year with more than 100 new letters? I am super jazzed about that. I can't wait to share some of the new stuff with you. But for now, of course, I've been walking you through the letters and the Carpenter biography to reveal the story behind the long and tortuous route to publication of The Lord of the Rings. Last week, we ended with Tolkien going back to Rayner Unwin, saying that he had rather modified his views about publishing the Silmarillion with The Lord of the Rings, and that something would be better than nothing. Did they take him back? That's what we're going to find out this week. I'll start by reading from letter number 134. In the introduction to this, we learn that Unwin replied on July 1st, "We do want to publish for you. It's only ways and means that have held us up." He also had asked Tolkien for a copy of the typescript to The Lord of the Rings. In late August, Tolkien replied, "The situation is this. I am anxious to publish The Lord of the Rings as soon as possible. I believe it to be a great, though not flawless, work. Let other things follow as they may. But as the expense of typing proved prohibitive, I had to do it all myself, and there is only one, more or less, fair copy in existence. I dare not consign that to the post." Yeah, I can understand that. Tolkien then suggested that Rayner could call on him after returning from his brief vacation, or that Rayner could come see him. Now, we switch to Carpenter's biography to pick up what happened next. On 19th September 1952, Rayner Unwin came to Oxford and collected the typescript of The Lord of the Rings. His father, Sir Stanley Unwin, was in Japan, so it was up to Rayner himself to make the next moves. He decided not to delay by rereading the bulky typescript, for he had seen virtually all of it 5 years earlier, and he still had a vivid impression of the story. Instead, he began immediately to obtain an estimate of production costs, for he was concerned to keep the price of the book within the limit to which the ordinary buyer and the circulating libraries in particular would go. After calculations and discussions in the Allen and Unwin offices, it seemed that the best thing would be to divide the book into 3 volumes, which could be sold with only a small profit margin at 21 shillings each. This was still a lot of money, rather more than the top price for a novel, but it was the best that could be done. Rayner sent a telegram to his father to ask whether they could publish the book, admitting that it was a big risk and warning that the firm could lose up to £1,000 through the project. But he concluded that in his opinion, it was a work of genius. Sir Stanley replied by cable, telling him to publish it. Now, that paragraph condenses a couple of other letters, though, specifically the part about breaking it into 3 volumes at 21 shillings each. So let's look at those letters. On the 23rd of October, Rayner Unwin reported to Tolkien that according to a printer's estimate, a single volume book would have to be priced at £3 10 shillings. Now, in letter number 135, Tolkien acknowledges that would certainly be a very big price for any book, even today. Were you to contemplate publishing a monster at such a price, what number would you print? And how many must you sell to indemnify you at the least? Now, let's be clear. £3 doesn't sound like much today, but using a currency inflation calculator, £3 10 shillings in 1952 is worth nearly £129 today. That's $162 for one book. So no wonder, after calculations and discussions, Allen and Unwin chose to publish the 3 volumes at 21 shillings each, though that's still nearly £39 or close to $49 per volume in today's money. That question that Tolkien asked, though, in letter number 135, how many must you sell to indemnify you at the least, was an interesting one. And that risk wasn't lost on the publisher. When we go back to Carpenter's biography, we read, on 10 November 1952, Rayner Unwin wrote to Tolkien to say that the firm would like to publish The Lord of the Rings under a profit-sharing agreement. This meant that Tolkien would not receive conventional royalty payments on a percentage basis. Instead, he would be paid half profits. That is, he would receive nothing until the sales of the book had been sufficient to cover its costs, but thenceforward he would share equally with the publisher in any profits that might accrue. This method, which had once been common practice but was by this time little used by other firms, was still favored by Sir Stanley Unwin for all potentially uneconomical books. It helped to keep down the price of such books since there was no need to include an additional sum in the costing to cover the author's royalties. On the other hand, if the book sold unexpectedly well, the author would benefit more substantially than under a royalty agreement. Not that Allen and Unwin expected The Lord of the Rings to sell more than a few thousand copies, for it was bulky, unconventional, and did not appeal to any one market, being neither a children's book nor an adult novel. I love that. I would say they drastically underestimated its success. I do love, though, how quickly Unwin took Tolkien back, and I can't help but wonder how much of that had to do with the fact that by that point, it was Rayner and not Sir Stanley that Tolkien was working with. After all, if you go back a few weeks to the beginning of this whole drama, I read that part where Tolkien was writing to Milton Waldman originally, where he included this little nugget. But I have very friendly personal relations with Stanley, whom all the same I do not much like, and with his second son, Rayner, whom I do like very much. I'm sure that had something to do with it. Next week, now that the publication is secured, we'll talk a little bit about the process that Tolkien had to go through to get the works ready on what became an accelerated timeline. We'll also learn the titles that Tolkien considered and wanted for his books once it became clear there would be 3 volumes. But that is it for today's Tolkien Tuesday. Now, if these few minutes leave you wanting more Tolkien content, be sure to check out the Prancing Pony podcast, where we've spent 7 years so far walking through the books, learning more about the professor and his works, and just having a nice chat at the pub about our favorite author. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Word Nerd Wednesday. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, follow or subscribe on your podcast apps to make sure each episode gets downloaded, and follow at Tolkien Times on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.